Welcome back, guys. I'm pretty much excited to introduce to you a new pattern today, design patterns. We dealt with command pattern initially during the initial tutorial on design patterns. Today we will discuss about a new pattern called strategy pattern. So, have you heard of close principle in object-oriented programming? If not, it works like this. Your code should be open for changes but closed for modifications. In the sense, let's say if you have a large construct of if else statements, what happens is after some time, if you keep on adding new algorithms, let's say an example being a sort algorithm where you have different kinds of sorts. Let's say you can sort an array based on different algorithms, starting being quick sort, bubble sort, hash sort, different kinds. So these are different algorithms that you are introducing to your code whenever it is needed. Let's say if you want to keep on extending to that, it becomes a problem, or it becomes a maintainability nightmare when you have lots of code which is not like encapsulated within its own classes. So this is where strategy pattern comes in, where we define a different set of algorithms solving the same problem. Let's say an example being the sort algorithm, where each and every algorithm is being created within its own derived classes, but it might have only a base class or an abstract class which will be exposed to a client. So the client is decoupled in this way, where it only knows about an interface or a protocol, in our case in iOS, where it does not required to know about the underlying algorithm which is being executed. So this is where a strategy pattern comes into picture and which solves this problem. So we might when we are actually going into the next tutorials, you might see that a strategy pattern looks very similar to something called as, let's say, a state pattern. But it might look similar, but they are solving two kinds of problems. So intent is different altogether. So with this background, let's get started. Let me just create a new project. Let me call it design patterns strategy example one. I'm calling it example one just because I might just introduce a new example which might use, let's say, an RX Swift or even a complex things. So whatever we are trying to do today is a sample application where we will introduce something like an Uber app, where you have the options to choose different kinds of transportation which is available. So based on the transportation chosen, let's say if it is a taxi or a train or a city bus or even a ferry or a boat, anything, that those are the options available. And whenever you choose that, it gives you estimates like what is the time required to reach a destination, or even, let's say, what is the convenience available using that transportation, and even cost associated with the transportation. So these are different algorithms being executed whenever we choose, let's say, a transportation type which we required. So that is basically one example I could think about which made sense when using strategy pattern. So that's what I will try to do today. So let me just continue building the app. So I already have some controls created for this tutorial, where it will load the transportations available and the estimates being shown. So those two screens are already created using custom controls, which I'll include in this project, which makes it easier to just explain the concept of strategy instead of actually creating the whole thing. So let me just grab some of things which I have already created. So first thing first, let me add the assets which I'll be using. So I have a set of assets which shows enabled and disabled states of different transportation icons like car or train or even a bus, a boat. I'm just choosing 4 types right now. So this is what I'll use to create the control. So let me just go back to grabbing those controls and show you what it will do. So I'm going to include it in the project. So let me just show you what I meant. So you can see already that I have a control which has a collection of buttons where when I choose, let's say, a bus, it'll trigger an algorithm which will calculate the estimates required to reach a place, the time required, and it does not actually calculate that for the time being, but then I've included something as a dummy data where it just shows you the time required if you are using, let's say, a bus or a taxi or a ferry or a train. So whenever a selection is made, it triggers an algorithm using the strategy and then calculates and shows you the estimate required. So for that I have an estimate screen where it shows the type of vehicle chosen and the estimate fare as well as the estimated time required to reach a place. So these 2 controls I already created. I'm just going to include it in my storyboard right now. So let's say if this is my storyboard view controller, let me add a couple of views. Maybe also a label. So just to keep it interesting, I'm just adding some elements. Let me just call this fare estimate. And then set all the constraints required. Then also have this view arranged. So I have this, so I'll add my first control there. It's called estimates control. So that's added now. Let me just go and grab one more view to add the other control. Set all the constraints required. That's it. One more maybe, and then have the class associated. It's called vehicle options control. So that's also done. So these are my 2 controls where it does nothing major. It's just that whenever that option is chosen, I'm just triggering for events where selection happens and I have a delegate and the parent whichever includes, it has to implement this delegate to receive the callbacks from these controls, the vehicle selection control. So let me include that. Go to my view controller. Before that, let me include the outlets. It's not rendering for some reason, but then let's just create and see what's there now. This is my estimates control. And the vehicle options control. So that's included now. Let me just add required things. Let's say the vehicle options control requires a delegate, which you can keep as the view controller, and then implement the delegate there. So it's called vehicle selection delegate, which will expose 4 events, callbacks. On taxi selected, on bus selected, ferry selected, and finally on train selected. So 4 of them is exposed. So whenever that selection happens, we need to apply a strategy where it can calculate the estimates required. So for that, let me just initialize these things, I guess. Let's run and see what's going on right now. This is the first step. I've included the controls. How does it look like? Delegate is done, control is done, it's added. It will not receive anything as yet. We just need to print and see for callbacks. Okay, so it just shows you these 2 screens where okay, so we have these 2 screens. Maybe I can just add do I have make it a little more stylish. Okay, one thing I can add is it has a white background, but it's like having some corner radius, etc., for that to be visible. Let's change our view's color to a light color, maybe. Yeah, maybe this. Yeah, so you can see that this view is also. Let's print and show you that you are receiving on bus selected. Just as a proof that everything is working. On taxi selected, ferry selected, and train selected. So 4 things done. Let's run this and see. So, okay, so you have 2 controls here, and this is how it looks like right now. When you choose it, it shows you highlighted one. Also, you see that the trigger prints the selection values here. You can see it's getting printed. So it's taxi, ferry, train. Now we need to update these things, which are not yet done. So vehicle type chosen has to reflect total fare and the estimated time. So these are ideally should be something like it gives a call to the server and checks what is the current price, if it's peak or something. Those are not in scope yet, but then I'm just trying to show you like how it works, like how a strategy can be applied without having code in if else constructs, or it applies with the open close principle, which I said, where it is the classes are open for extension, or even the functionality is open for extension. Let's say if you include an helicopter in later point, then you can have it as one of the options and can have its own strategy applied. So that's something which like helps you with the open close principle, which is the fundamentals of object oriented programming. So let's get with whatever we are doing right now. So go back to, so the selection happened, and we need to start reflecting that. So before that, one more other thing we need to do is to instantiate this with a configure which accepts a view model. I just created for the sake of time being, but it will be this project or this example will be extended with RX and everything, where it becomes more easy with the delegates and all. So I just included an estimate view presentable, which is again having a estimates view model, which will configure this control. Let me just create that. We call it that view model, estimates view model. It's already there, so I'll just create that estimates view model, and maybe I have initially it'll have some values, like if you can see I don't have anything. It's 0 0. It's like setting it to the defaults. So this same configure I'll use to actually do the algorithm changes to be reflected. So let me just do that. For the time's sake, I'll just passing this estimates view model. So that being done, if I run this, now it'll show the values being set. So now this control is configured. It just does not receive the callbacks yet, but it has used the default values being used in the view model. So that being done, let's get started with creating the strategy. So we are now looking at applying algorithms for calculations. So let me just create something called as estimate strategy. It's just a class. It's actually a protocol. Let me just create it as a protocol. So this is what will get exposed to the clients. The client will not know the actual implementation. So it's writing your program to protocols. That's the only thing we are doing. So estimate strategy, that's my protocol, which will just have a function. Let's say this is my signature of the algorithm. So this is what I'll just expose. Strategy has the signature. So in this case, I'll just call it calculate estimates. It just calculates and returns you something of these estimates. So for that, let me just create a construct. So let me call it estimate model. It just has something like what do I need? I need the vehicle type, and vehicle what it needs to have the vehicle type, then the estimated time, and the third thing, what does it expose? So whatever we need to populate, the fare, the vehicle fare, that's what the second thing is. So where do I have the strategy? Vehicle fare, just keeping these strings, but it can vary based on the requirement. This just being a dummy or a sample project. Estimated duration, again a string. So this is my struct, which I'll just create. So whenever a calculate happens, calculate estimate just returns the estimate for that particular chosen vehicle. So that's what. So I have the protocol strategy now. Now I need to create the specific strategy or the concrete classes required to be used for setting those algorithms. So for that, let me just call estimate strategy. So this should be for, let's say, bus estimate strategy. So that's my calculate estimates. So this needs to now return an estimate model. So let me just call it as bus fare. I'm just keeping something like a $2. Duration, maybe takes for $2, it might, let's say, take 3 hours to reach your destination, 3 hours 15 minutes or something. So that's my bus estimate strategy. Now let me just create something for my taxi. And implement this one where it just returns something similar, but this being a taxi and fare a little higher, $15 maybe, and it might reach like in 45 minutes. So it's faster but little costlier. And similarly, I have something for my train. So this is my train, which might take like $6 half the time, maybe 1 hour 30 minutes. And finally, the ferry, which is like in between, where it might just cost me like $8 and I'll reach like in 2 hours 30 minutes or something. So ferry being fun, so I'll have ferry. So those are my 4 strategies now. So I have this ready. All that I'll do is to include this in, say if it is my estimate strategy. So that's my I'm including it, oh not here, in view model, view controller, where it needs to identify what is current strategy. So this is that, and whenever a bus is selected, so I need to create the strategy. So this can actually happen within a separate factory, like when whatever the type being chosen, it just can return the type of strategy required. But in this case, I'm just keeping it like estimate strategy. So let me go back to the strategy. Let me create some singletons there. So this is my base bus, then taxi, train, Very. So I have these 4 exposed through singletons, which is another pattern, which is like simpler pattern, which I don't think I even need to include it in this tutorials, but then it should be pretty easy. So this is my, let's say if I chose bus, then I'll just pass this as the estimated strategy. So that's my estimate strategy. Similarly, let's say if it is taxi, I'm just passing this instance of, so it's actually exposed through this protocol, but consuming it need not happen here, this setting part. It can even happen, it's a different layer which decides on, based on the type selected, it returns you the type of strategy required. So ferry estimate, so everything is an estimate object. So we are actually programming for the protocol. We are not actually calling, we will not be calling the estimate directly through this class, but through the protocol here, which is the estimate strategy. So this being ferry, and finally the train. So we have the 4 strategies now. Based on the selection, the strategy gets selected, and then once that is done, all that we need to do is to call the update estimates, which is more like updating the view. So it just will accept the strategy, which is again a protocol estimate strategy. I'm passing the strategy here, and then what it does is estimate strategy will just calculate this and will give me estimate model back. So based on the type of vehicle chosen, it just calculates and gives you the estimate. That's all it does. And finally, once I receive the estimate for that specific chosen vehicle, all I need to do is call this configure again. So estimate model, estimate controls.configure with the view model. So I already have this view model instance available. All I need to do is to reset the values, estimate the vehicle type chosen. So this is already carrying the estimate model, is already carrying that information for me. All I'll do is get that vehicle fare, estimate view model, vehicle type, now the vehicle fare value, which I'll just pass to the vehicle fare from the model, and estimated view model dot estimated time again is available in the model. Duration, I'm just passing it, and finally I'll just configure the control again using this. It's actually updating the values within the control, which is my estimated control, this being the control. So within that control, it just has a configure function which accepts the values and then resets the label values or the text values of the labels. So that's all happens inside, but the basic idea is that I'm just passing the strategy to calculate the estimate using the protocol. So that's the main thing. Strategy is through a protocol, and the calculate, estimate are my strategies for or algorithms. So it has a base function which is through the protocol, and each of the derived classes has the implementation or the algorithms required. So those will get called based on the strategy algorithm which is called up. So that's the whole idea here. So this is done now. All I need to do now is to call the estimate. So it's asking for an estimate strategy. I passed that. Similar thing I need to do for each case. So this is what I'll do now, and then let's rerun and see whether things are working. It's pretty simple. Idea is just to have the algorithms encapsulated, open close principles. So as soon as I choose bus, okay, I sent the wrong value. So here it should be vehicle type values, vehicle type. So that should fix it. Let's run it once more. So it's already working as expected. So I choose bus, it shows vehicle chosen is bus, total fare is $2, estimated time. So this just showing a value which is not coming from server or something, but when you are actually having an implementation where it needs to estimate in this fashion, if it is calling a server, then you can encapsulate those things within your own strategies instead of having, let's say, a type specific check and then doing it, which is error prone and not as per the open close principle. So this works fine. Like you can see, whenever I choose the type, it calls the specific strategy and then starts estimating or applying the algorithm required. So that's a basic idea I wanted to highlight using this tutorial. Hope this made sense. If you have any queries, get back to me. I'll be working on the next design pattern, or maybe before that I might come back with one more episode of an advanced version of Viper, where we will have an offline database integration as well as a server call, API calls using Alamo Fire or something, or even Moya, and then we'll see how to do that. So before that, hope this helped you. Bye for now. Thanks for watching.